The pen felt like a loaded gun in my trembling fingers. 23 years of living, and I never imagined my life would come down to a signature on a piece of paper that would erase everything I was. The man sitting across from me didn't blink. His eyes, dark as freshly spilled ink, watched me with an intensity that made my blood run cold and hot at the same time. He was beautiful in the way that nightmares are beautiful. Terrifying, captivating, impossible to look away from. His name was whispered in the shadows of every dark alley in this city. Damien Ravello, the youngest mafia boss in 3 generations. And in exactly 60 seconds, according to the contract in front of me, I would belong to him completely. "Sign it," he said, his voice smooth as velvet wrapped around a blade. "Or your father dies tonight. Your mother dies tomorrow. Your little sister never sees her 18th birthday." My hand shook so violently that I couldn't keep the pen steady. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. But what choice did I have? What choice does anyone have when the devil himself holds your family's lives in his perfectly manicured hands? I signed the contract. And that's when everything I thought I knew about Damien Ravello, about my father, about my entire existence, was revealed to be a lie so devastating that it would take me to the very edge of sanity and push me right over. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how I ended up in that room, pen in hand, signing my soul away to the most dangerous man in the country. You need to understand who I was before that moment. Because the woman who walked into that room and the woman who eventually walked out were not the same person. Before I continue, tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments right now. I want to know how far this story will travel. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next is something you cannot afford to miss. Trust me, the twist in this story is one that will haunt you long after you've finished watching. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Ellaria Vance. At least, that's the name I grew up with. That's the name my father gave me when I was born on a rainy Tuesday in a small hospital that has long since been demolished. My father, Vincent Vance, was a good man, or so I believed. He owned a modest restaurant called the Golden Olive in the heart of the city. It wasn't fancy. The tables were mismatched, the chairs creaked, and the bathroom door never closed properly. But it was ours. It was home. My mother, Serafina, was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She had hair like spun gold and eyes the color of the Mediterranean Sea. She used to sing to me when I couldn't sleep, old lullabies in a language I didn't understand. I later learned it was Sicilian, her family's native tongue. She never talked about her family. Whenever I asked, her eyes would grow distant, and she would change the subject so smoothly that I stopped asking altogether. I had a little sister named Valentina. She was 15, with my mother's sea-green eyes and my father's stubbornness. She wanted to be a marine biologist. She had posters of whales and dolphins covering every inch of her bedroom walls. She believed the ocean held all the world's secrets, and one day she would discover them all. We were a normal family. At least, that's what I believed. Normal problems, normal dreams, normal dinners around a table that wobbled slightly on one side. Everything changed on the night of my 23rd birthday. My father had closed the restaurant early, something he never did. Money was tight. It was always tight. But he insisted on throwing me a small party. Just family. My mother made her famous tiramisu, the recipe that she claimed came from generations of Sicilian women before her. Valentina had saved up her babysitting money to buy me a charm bracelet with a tiny silver star. "Because you're my star," she had said, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment at her own sentimentality. We were laughing. I remember that so clearly. My father was telling a story about a customer who had tried to pay his bill with a poem instead of money. A terrible poem, according to my father, which made it even more insulting. My mother was pretending to scold him for making fun of the poor man. Valentina was sneaking extra tiramisu when she thought no one was looking. And then the door burst open. 3 men walked in, and I knew immediately that they were not here for dinner. They wore suits that cost more than my father made in a year. Their faces were blank, expressionless, like masks carved from stone. But it was the man behind them who made my blood freeze in my veins. He was young, perhaps late 20s, maybe 30 at most. His dark hair was slicked back from a face that could have belonged to a fallen angel. High cheekbones, a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. And those eyes. God, those eyes. They swept across our small restaurant like he was cataloging everything, calculating its worth, and finding it severely lacking. "Vincent Vance," he said, and his voice was calm, almost gentle. It was somehow more terrifying than if he had screamed. "Did you really think you could hide from me forever?" My father stood up so quickly that his chair crashed to the floor. His face had gone white, not pale, but white, like all the blood had drained from his body in an instant. "Damien," he whispered, "please, not here, not in front of my family." Damien. The name meant nothing to me then, but the way my father said it, with such fear, such resigned desperation, told me everything I needed to know. This man was dangerous. This man was death walking in a tailored suit. "Your family?" Damien tilted his head slightly, like a predator considering its prey. "You mean the family you built with money you stole from mine? The family you've been protecting with my dead father's blood?" I didn't understand. Nothing made sense. My father was a restaurant owner. He made pasta and poured wine and told bad jokes to customers. He was not a man who had anything to do with blood or stolen money or whatever this stranger was talking about. "Papa?" Valentina's voice was small, frightened. "What's happening?" My mother grabbed her, pulling her close. "Vincent," she said, and there was something in her voice that I had never heard before. Recognition. Fear, yes, but also something that looked horribly like guilt. "Vincent, what did you do?" My father's shoulders slumped. In that moment, he looked 100 years old. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. I thought I had more time. I thought—" "You thought wrong." Damien stepped forward, and his men parted around him like water around a shark. 17 years ago, you made a deal with my father. You traded information that led to his death, information you sold to the Kozlov family. In exchange, they gave you protection and enough money to disappear, to create this pathetic little life. Did you think we wouldn't find you eventually? Did you think the Ravello family forgets its debts? My world tilted on its axis. My father, my kind, bumbling, joke-telling father, was responsible for a murder? He had betrayed the mafia? He had been living a lie for 17 years, and all of us, my mother, my sister, and me, had been living that lie right alongside him? "Take me," my father said quickly. "Whatever you want from me, take it. But leave my family out of this. They didn't know. They're innocent." Damien's laugh was soft, almost gentle. It was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. "Innocent? There is no such thing as innocent in our world, Vincent. You should know that better than anyone." He paused, and his eyes, those dark, depthless eyes, landed on me. Besides, I don't want you. Your debt cannot be repaid with your worthless life. But your daughter, a smile curved his lips, slow and deliberate. Your daughter might suffice. My mother screamed. My father lunged forward, but two of the men grabbed him before he could take a single step. Valentina was crying, clutching my arm so tightly that her nails drew blood. And I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, as the most powerful man in the criminal underworld looked at me like I was a prize he had just won. Ellaria Vance, Damien said, tasting my name like it was something sweet and poisonous. You are going to come with me. You are going to sign a contract that binds you to me completely. And you are going to do it willingly, or everyone in this room will be dead before the tiramisu gets cold. I should have fought. I should have screamed. I should have done something, anything, other than stand there like a lamb accepting slaughter. But the truth was, I was not brave. I was not a heroine. I was a 23-year-old woman who had never faced anything more dangerous than a difficult exam or an aggressive customer. So I did what any terrified person would do. I nodded. And I followed the devil out of my father's restaurant, leaving behind the ruins of everything I had ever known. The car ride to Damien's estate took 47 minutes. I know because I counted every second, trying desperately to memorize the route, to find some escape, some hope. But there was none. The windows were tinted so dark that I couldn't see outside. The doors were locked, and the man sitting beside me radiated danger like heat from a furnace. He didn't speak to me. He didn't even look at me. He simply stared straight ahead, lost in thoughts I couldn't begin to fathom. What was he planning? What did he want with me? The possibilities running through my mind were each more horrifying than the last. When the car finally stopped, I was pulled out and led through a maze of hallways that seemed to stretch on forever. The house, no, the mansion, was opulent in a way that felt almost obscene. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, paintings that I was certain belonged in museums. It was beautiful and cold, like the inside of a very expensive tomb. Finally, we reached a study. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, a massive desk that dominated the room. And on that desk sat a single piece of paper. The contract. "Sit," Damien said, taking his place behind the desk. "Read it. Understand what you're agreeing to." With trembling hands, I picked up the contract and began to read. And that's when I realized that my nightmare was only just beginning. The words on that contract burned themselves into my brain. I read them once, twice, 3 times, hoping that somehow the meaning would change if I just looked at it long enough. But the words remained the same, mocking me with their cold, legal precision. By signing this contract, the undersigned agrees to the following terms for a period of 3 years. Complete obedience to Damien Ravello in all matters pertaining to business and personal conduct. Residence at the Ravello estate without exception. No contact with family, friends, or former acquaintances without express written permission. Complete discretion regarding all matters witnessed or learned during the contract period. In exchange, the Vance family will be granted protection from all outstanding debts and vendettas, and their lives will be spared. 3 years. 1,095 days. 26,280 hours. I would be a prisoner, a possession, a thing to be ordered around and controlled. "You can't be serious," I whispered, though even as I said it, I knew he was deadly serious. Men like Damien Ravello did not joke. They did not bluff. They simply took what they wanted and destroyed anything that stood in their way. "I am always serious, Miss Vance." He leaned back in his chair, watching me with those unreadable dark eyes. "Consider yourself fortunate. Many others who have crossed my family were not offered such generous terms." Generous. He called this generous. My fingers crumpled the edges of the paper as rage, hot, unexpected, completely useless rage surged through me. "This is slavery." "This is justice." For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Something that looked almost like pain before it was quickly masked. "Your father destroyed my family. He sold information that led my father into an ambush. Do you know what the Kozlov family did to him, Miss Vance? Do you have any idea how long it took Salvatore Ravello to die?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. 3 days, Damien continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. 3 days of torture. They sent pieces of him back to us. A finger one day, an ear the next. By the time we found his body, my mother could barely identify him. She never recovered. She sits in her room now, staring at photographs, speaking to a ghost. He stood abruptly, turning to stare out the window into the darkness. "So yes, Miss Vance, 3 years of your life in exchange for your father's crimes seems more than generous to me." For a long moment, silence filled the room. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I could feel the weight of his grief, his rage, pressing down on me like a physical thing. And for a fraction of a second, just a fraction, I understood him. If someone had done that to my father, to my family, wouldn't I want revenge too? But understanding him didn't change my situation. Understanding him didn't make the contract in my hands any less terrible. What exactly will I be expected to do? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, hollow, defeated. Damien turned back to face me, and his expression was unreadable once more. "You will play the role of my fiancé in public. Certain business arrangements require the appearance of stability, of respectability. A man about to be married is seen as more reliable, more grounded. You will attend events with me. You will smile and play the part of the devoted future wife. In private, you will have your own quarters and will be expected to maintain the appearance of this household. And if I refuse, then your family dies. Tonight. I will personally ensure that your father watches your mother and sister die before I end his pathetic life. And then I will come for you anyway." He said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that I knew without a doubt he meant every word. I thought of Valentina's charm bracelet still on my wrist, the little silver star catching the light. I thought of my mother's lullabies, my father's terrible jokes. I thought of all the ordinary moments I had taken for granted, the mundane happiness of a life that I would never have again. And I signed the contract. The moment the pen lifted from the paper, something inside me shattered. I felt it break, my hope, my freedom, my sense of self, all crumbling into dust. But I didn't cry. I had promised myself I wouldn't cry in front of him, and I kept that promise. Good, Damien said, taking the contract from my hands. Cassian will show you to your quarters. You begin your duties tomorrow. Cassian, it turned out, was a mountain of a man, with shoulders broad enough to block a doorway, and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. But when he spoke, his voice was surprisingly gentle. This way, Miss Vance. I followed him through more hallways, up a sweeping staircase, and finally to a room that was larger than my family's entire apartment. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in silk and velvet. There was a sitting area, a private bathroom that gleamed with marble and gold fixtures, and a walk-in closet already filled with clothes in my exact size. How? I started, but Cassian interrupted me. Mr. Ravello has been planning this for a long time. He is very thorough. There was something in his voice, pity perhaps, that made my skin crawl. After he left, I stood in the middle of that beautiful, terrible room and finally allowed myself to break down. I cried until there were no tears left, until my body was wrung dry of emotion. And then I stood up, washed my face, and began to plan. Because here's the thing about being backed into a corner. You either curl up and die, or you find a way to fight back. And I had never been the type to simply curl up and die. The next few weeks were a blur of adjustment and observation. I learned the layout of the mansion, memorizing escape routes, even though I knew using them would mean my family's death. I learned the names of the staff, the cook, Marguerite, who had kind eyes and a sharp tongue, the housekeeper, Elisabetta, who had worked for the Ravello family for 40 years, the gardener, an ancient man named Giacomo, who tended the roses with more care than most people showed their children. I learned about Damien, too, though he remained an enigma wrapped in shadows. He worked constantly, holding meetings in his study that lasted for hours, taking calls at all hours of the night. He ate meals alone, rarely spoke to anyone except to give orders, and when he did interact with me, it was brief and businesslike. But I noticed things, small things. The way he always paused by a particular photograph in the main hallway, a family portrait showing a younger Damien with his parents and an older boy who must have been a brother. The way his face softened slightly when he spoke with his mother, who I had glimpsed once, a frail woman with vacant eyes who called him by his father's name. The way he flinched, almost imperceptibly, whenever someone mentioned the Kozlov family. Damien Ravello was a monster. Of that I had no doubt. But he was a monster who had been made, not born. And that realization both frightened and intrigued me. My first public appearance as his fiancée came exactly 1 month after I signed the contract. It was a charity gala, because apparently even criminals donate to charity, probably for the tax write-offs. And I was expected to be perfect. "You will smile," Damien instructed as we sat in the back of his car, heading toward the venue. "You will be charming. You will not speak to anyone about anything of substance. If asked about our relationship, you will say we met through mutual friends and fell in love instantly. You will look at me with adoration. Any deviation from these instructions will have consequences." I turned to look at him, and for the first time, I didn't look away. "And what about you? What will you be doing while I'm performing this little act?" Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps at my boldness. "I will be conducting business." "What kind of business?" "The kind that is none of your concern." but there was a hint of something in his voice. Not quite respect, but an acknowledgement of something. Just do your job, Miss Vance, and we will get through this evening without incident. The gala was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across the ballroom. Women dripped with diamonds, and men reeked of power and old money. And everywhere we went, people parted like the Red Sea, their eyes following us with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Damien!" A man approached us, his smile wide and predatory. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, with silver hair and eyes that reminded me of a snake. And this must be the mysterious fiancée I've been hearing about. I must say, she's far lovelier than the rumors suggested. "Victor," Damien's voice was cold. "I didn't expect to see you here." Victor Kozlov. I knew the name immediately. This was him, the man whose family had killed Damien's father, the enemy. And he was standing right in front of us, smiling like they were old friends. "Well, you know how it is." Victor's eyes swept over me, and I felt like I needed a shower. Charity is so important, especially when it brings together old acquaintances. He turned his attention fully to me. "Tell me, my dear, however did you end up with this one? He's not exactly known for his charm." I felt Damien tense beside me, felt the danger radiating off him like heat. And in that moment, I made a decision. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe it was suicidal. But I opened my mouth and spoke. "Oh, you'd be surprised," I said, my voice honey-sweet. "Damien is incredibly charming when he wants to be. He swept me completely off my feet. I've never met anyone so devoted, so passionate." I looked up at Damien with what I hoped was convincing adoration. "He makes me feel like the most important person in the world." Victor's smile faltered slightly. He hadn't expected me to be anything other than a trophy, a silent ornament on Damien's arm. My response had thrown him off balance. "How touching," Victor said. "Well, I won't keep you. I'm sure you have much to discuss with your guests. But Damien, we should talk soon. There are matters that require attention." After he walked away, Damien's grip on my arm tightened slightly. "That was unexpected," he murmured. "I told you I would do my job," I replied, keeping my smile fixed in place. "I never said I would do it poorly." For the first time since I had met him, Damien Ravello smiled. It was small, barely a curve of his lips, and it disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. But I had seen it, and something in my chest shifted, just slightly, in a way that terrified me more than any threat ever could. 3 months into my captivity, because that's what it was, regardless of the silk sheets and gourmet meals, I began to notice things that didn't add up. The first was Damien's mother, Isolde. I had been warned to stay away from her, told that she was fragile, unstable, not to be disturbed. But one afternoon, I took a wrong turn in the labyrinthine hallways and found myself standing in front of her door, slightly ajar, soft music drifting out. I should have walked away. I knew I should have. But something pulled me forward, some instinct I couldn't name. The room beyond was beautiful and sad, filled with photographs and flowers and the ghosts of happier times. And in the center, sitting in a chair by the window, was Isolde Ravello. She was frail, yes, but her eyes, when they met mine, were sharp, clear, far from the vacant stare I had glimpsed before. "You're the Vance girl," she said, her voice stronger than I expected. "Come in, close the door. We have much to discuss." I hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside and doing as she asked. "My son thinks he's protecting me by keeping me locked away," Isolde continued, gesturing for me to sit. "He thinks I'm too broken to face the world. Perhaps I was, once. But grief does strange things, child. It can destroy you, or it can sharpen you into something dangerous. Why are you telling me this? I asked, settling into a chair across from her. Because you're not what I expected. Her eyes studied me with an intensity that reminded me uncomfortably of her son. I expected a victim, a mouse, someone who would cower and weep and wait for rescue. But you're watching, learning, planning. My heart stuttered in my chest. Was I that obvious? Had Damien noticed too? Isolde laughed softly, as if reading my thoughts. Don't worry. Damien sees what he expects to see. A dutiful captive playing her role. He doesn't see the fire in your eyes when you think no one is watching. But I see it. She leaned forward. I see you, Ellaria Vance, and I'm going to tell you something that will change everything you think you know. Let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone offered you the truth, but you knew that once you heard it, there was no going back? That moment of standing on the edge, knowing that one step forward would change everything forever? Tell me in the comments. What would you do? Would you step back and stay safe in your ignorance? Or would you leap into the unknown? I want to know what you think. Because what Isolde told me next shattered my entire world. Your father didn't betray my husband, she said, her words slow and deliberate. Your father tried to save him. The room spun around me. What? Vincent Vance was one of Salvatore's most trusted men. They grew up together, closer than brothers. When Salvatore learned that someone in his inner circle was feeding information to the Kozlovs, he asked Vincent to investigate. Vincent discovered that the traitor was someone very close to our family, someone no one would have suspected. Who? The word came out as barely a whisper. Isolde's face hardened. My eldest son, Lorenzo. The brother in the photograph, the one I had seen in the family portrait. I don't understand. Damien believes what he was told. After Salvatore died, Lorenzo came to us with evidence that Vincent had been the traitor. Documents, recordings, all fabricated, but convincing enough that a grieving widow and a 17-year-old boy would believe them. Lorenzo had Vincent framed, and then made sure he had to disappear before he could defend himself. My mind raced, trying to process this information. But why? Why would Lorenzo betray his own father? Power, ambition. Salvatore was grooming Damien to take over the family business, not Lorenzo. My eldest son couldn't accept being passed over. He made a deal with Victor Kozlov, our family's greatest enemy. In exchange for information that led to his father's death, Lorenzo was promised a position of power in the new order that would emerge. Then where is Lorenzo now? Isolde's expression twisted with old grief and new rage. Dead. Or so everyone believes. He disappeared 3 years after Salvatore's murder. Some say he had a disagreement with the Kozlovs. Others say he faked his death and is living somewhere under a new identity. I believe... She paused, her hands trembling slightly. I believe he's still pulling strings from the shadows, still working with Victor, still using my remaining son as a pawn in whatever game he's playing. Everything I thought I knew was crumbling around me. My father wasn't a traitor. He was a victim. And the man who had forced me to sign that contract, who had threatened my family, who had turned my life into a gilded prison, he was a victim too. A pawn manipulated by his own brother. Why are you telling me this? I asked again, But this time, the question carried a different weight. Because I need your help. Isolde reached out and took my hands in her frail grip. I'm old. I'm sick. Truly sick, not just playing a role. The doctors give me perhaps a year. I cannot watch my remaining son destroy himself on lies and vengeance any longer. I cannot go to my grave knowing that Lorenzo won, that the truth died with Salvatore. What do you want me to do? I want you to find the evidence. I want you to show Damien the truth. I want you to help me destroy Victor Kozlov and, if he's still alive, my eldest son. Her eyes burned with a fire that belied her frail frame. I know you have no reason to help us. We've taken everything from you. But your father's name is at stake too. His honor, his truth. And I truly believe, that you're the one who can unravel this web of lies. I should have said no. I should have wanted nothing more than to escape, to forget about the Ravello family and their blood feuds and their secrets. But Isolde was right. My father had lived for 17 years under the shadow of a crime he didn't commit. He had raised me with guilt and fear, constantly looking over his shoulder for a punishment he didn't deserve. I'll help you, I said, but I want something in return. Name it. When this is over, when the truth comes out, I want my contract voided. I want my family left in peace, and I want a personal apology from your son. Isolde smiled, and for a moment, I could see the powerful woman she must have been before grief hollowed her out. You have my word. And so began my double life. By day, I played the devoted fiancé, attending events on Damien's arm, smiling for cameras, pretending to be content in my cage. By night, I searched. I investigated. I became a shadow in my own prison, slipping through hallways and rifling through documents. Cassian, the bodyguard who had first shown me to my room, became an unlikely ally. He had been loyal to Salvatore before he died, and his loyalty had transferred to Damien. But Isolde had earned his trust years ago. He helped me access areas of the mansion that were off limits. He told me stories about the old days, about my father and Salvatore, about the brotherhood they had shared. Your father was a good man, Cassian told me one night, as we sat in the kitchen long after everyone else had gone to bed. The best man I ever knew, aside from Salvatore. When news came that Vincent had betrayed us, I didn't believe it, not at first. But the evidence was overwhelming, and grief makes people believe impossible things. What changed your mind? He was quiet for a long moment. Nothing. Everything. Small inconsistencies over the years. Questions that were never answered. The way Victor Kozlov looks at Damien, not with hatred, but with satisfaction, like a cat playing with its prey. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that Isolde was right. Lorenzo was alive. He was working with Victor, and together they were planning something. Something that would destroy Damien and everything his family had built. But I still had no proof. Nothing concrete. Nothing that would convince Damien to believe me over 17 years of lies. Until the night everything changed. It was raining. I remember that so clearly. The way the water streaked down the windows like tears. The rumble of thunder in the distance. The electricity in the air that seemed to foreshadow what was coming. I had been at the mansion for 7 months. 7 months of pretending. 7 months of searching. 7 months of dancing on the edge of a knife. That night, there was a party at the estate, a celebration of some business deal that had gone through, though the specifics were kept from me. The mansion was full of people, powerful people, dangerous people, the kind of people who could make entire families disappear with a single phone call. And among them, I saw someone who didn't belong. He was standing in the corner of the ballroom, nursing a drink and watching the crowd with eyes that missed nothing. He was older than I remembered, his hair more gray than brown now, his face more lined. But I would have known him anywhere. My father. My heart stopped, literally stopped. For one terrifying moment, I thought I might faint, right there in the middle of the party, surrounded by monsters in evening wear. What was he doing here? How had he gotten in? Was this some kind of trap? Our eyes met across the room, and I saw him give an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Don't react. Don't acknowledge me. Keep pretending. With more self-control than I knew I possessed, I turned back to the conversation I had been having with some society wife whose name I had already forgotten. I laughed at something she said. I sipped my champagne. I played my part. But my mind was racing. An hour later, I made my excuses and slipped away from the party. Following the subtle signals my father had given me, a nod toward the garden, a gesture indicating time, I made my way outside. He was waiting in the greenhouse, surrounded by Giacomo's beloved roses, looking like a ghost from a life I had almost forgotten. Papa. The word came out broken, bare a whisper. My brave girl. He pulled me into a hug, and for one precious moment I was a child again, safe in my father's arms, protected from a world that couldn't hurt me. But I wasn't a child anymore, and the world had hurt me in ways I was only beginning to understand. How are you here? I asked when we finally pulled apart. If they find you, they won't. I have friends in places Damien doesn't know about. Friends who have been waiting years for a chance to bring the truth to light. You know about Lorenzo? About the betrayal? His face darkened. I've always known, but I had no way to prove it. No way to fight back without putting you and your mother and Valentina at risk. So I ran. I hid. I became a coward. The word was bitter on his lips. But then I heard that you had been taken, that my daughter had been forced to sacrifice herself for my sins I didn't even commit. Mama? Valentina? Are they safe? They're hidden. Somewhere Lorenzo and Victor will never find them. That's part of why I'm here. He pulled an envelope from inside his jacket. This is everything. Documents, recordings, evidence that I've been gathering for 17 years. Evidence that proves Lorenzo was the traitor. Evidence that implicates Victor Kozlov in Salvatore's murder and a dozen other crimes. I took the envelope with trembling hands. Why didn't you use this before? Because it wasn't complete. Because I needed one final piece of the puzzle. He paused, his eyes meeting mine. I needed access to the Ravello estate. Access that I couldn't get on my own. Understanding dawned. You knew. You knew I would be taken. No. The denial was immediate and fierce. No, I would never. Ellaria, you must believe me. When Damien took you, I was devastated. I tried to find a way to rescue you, to trade myself in your place. But then Isolde reached out to me. She told me about her plan. About you. She contacted you? She's been looking for me for years. She never believed I was the traitor. Mother's instinct, she said. When she finally found me, she told me about the bargain you'd made. And she gave me hope. Tears glittered in my father's eyes. My daughter, braver than I ever was, fighting a battle I should have fought years ago. I wanted to be angry at him. A part of me was angry at the lies, the years of hiding, the burden I had been forced to carry. But looking at him now, at the guilt and grief etched into every line of his face, I couldn't summon the rage. What happens now? I asked. Now, we finish this. Victor and Lorenzo are planning to move against Damien within the week. They're going to use you to destroy him. Me? How? They've been watching you. They know about your meetings with Isolde. They're going to expose you as a spy, claim that you've been working with me all along to destroy the Ravello family from within. Damien will believe it because of who you are. And in the chaos that follows, they'll make their move. Cold horror washed over me. All my careful pretending, all my secret investigations. And they had known all along. They had been using me, just as they had used everyone else. We have to warn Damien, I said. Can you get him alone? Away from the party, away from his guards? I can try. I paused, looking at the envelope in my hands. And this? When do I show him this? When the time is right. When he's ready to hear the truth. My father placed his hands on my shoulders, looking at me with such love and pride that it made my heart ache. I'm sorry, Ellaria. Sorry for everything you've been through. Sorry for the childhood I stole from you with my secrets. But know this. Everything I did for you. For your mother and sister. To protect the people I love. I know, Papa. And I did. Finally, I understood. We embraced once more, and then he was gone, disappearing into the rain like he had never been there at all. I made my way back into the party, my mind spinning with plans and fears and desperate hope. I had to find Damien. I had to warn him. But how could I get him alone without raising suspicion? The answer came in the form of an unexpected ally. Cassian appeared at my elbow, his face grim. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that's about to walk through that door. He nodded toward the main entrance of the ballroom, where the doors were being pushed open to admit a new guest. My blood ran cold. Walking into the party like he owned the place was a man who looked exactly like Damien. Older, crueler, with eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. Lorenzo Ravello had come home. The ballroom fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every glass paused mid-sip. Every eye turned toward the ghost who had just walked through the door. Lorenzo stood in the entrance, drinking in the attention like fine wine. He was older than the photograph I had seen, but the resemblance to Damien was unmistakable. Same dark hair, same sharp features. But where Damien's coldness masked pain, Lorenzo's covered nothing but emptiness. Brother. Lorenzo's voice carried across the silent room. Did you miss me? Damien stepped forward, and I saw his hand move instinctively toward the gun I knew he kept hidden beneath his jacket. You're supposed to be dead. Ah, yes, that. Lorenzo smiled, and it was the smile of a shark scenting blood. I'm afraid my death was greatly exaggerated. A necessary fiction, you understand. I had work to do, places to be, people to betray. He laughed at his own joke, though no one else did. Guards. Damien's voice was tight with controlled fury. Take him. But no one moved. Not a single one of the armed men stationed around the room took a step toward Lorenzo. Instead, they turned their weapons, not toward the intruder, but toward Damien. I'm afraid your guards answer to me now, little brother. Lorenzo strode into the room, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor, as does most of your organization. You see, while you've been playing house with your pretty fiancé and avenging our father on the wrong people, I've been building alliances, making deals, preparing for this moment. Victor Kozlov emerged from the crowd, taking his place at Lorenzo's side. Did you really think we'd let you dismantle everything we've built, Damien? You've been a useful figurehead, I'll admit. The young, grieving son carrying on his father's legacy. Very sympathetic. Very distracting. The pieces clicked into place. All the business deals, all the expansions, all the moves that had seemed to strengthen the Ravello family. They had actually been consolidating power in Lorenzo's hands. Why? Damien's voice was hoarse. I had never heard him sound so lost. Why would you do this? Father loved you. He trusted you. Father passed me over. Lorenzo's mask slipped, revealing the rage beneath. He chose you, his precious younger son, to inherit everything. I was supposed to be nothing, an advisor, a supporter, forever in your shadow. He shook his head. I couldn't accept that. So I made other arrangements. You killed him. It wasn't a question. You killed our father. I facilitated his death. There's a difference. Lorenzo shrugged like they were discussing the weather. The Kozlovs did the dirty work. I simply provided the information they needed. Something broke in Damien's face. All the coldness, all the carefully constructed walls. They shattered, revealing the broken boy beneath, the 17-year-old who had lost his father and spent his entire adult life chasing the wrong revenge. And Vincent Vance? I heard myself ask, stepping forward despite every instinct screaming at me to stay hidden. He was innocent, wasn't he? He was trying to protect your father, and you framed him. Lorenzo turned his attention to me, and his smile widened. Ah, the lovely Ellaria. I was wondering when you'd join the conversation. He walked toward me, and I forced myself not to back away. Yes, Vincent was innocent. Loyal to the end, that one. But I needed a scapegoat, and he was convenient. The evidence I manufactured was quite convincing, if I do say so myself. You destroyed my family. My voice shook with rage. You turned my father into a fugitive. You made him live in fear for 17 years. And then I had my brother bring you here. Lorenzo reached out to touch my face, and I jerked away. Do you want to know why, Ellaria? Because you were supposed to be the final nail in the coffin. The daughter of the traitor, caught spying for her father. What better justification could there be for eliminating my brother and taking what should have been mine all along? Everything my father had warned me about. They had been watching. They had known. And now they were using me exactly as they had planned. But you miscalculated, I said quietly. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. Did I? You thought I was just a pawn, a scared little girl who would do anything to save her family. I straightened my spine, meeting his cold eyes with a fire I hadn't known I possessed. You forgot that pawns can become queens. I reached into my dress, into the hidden pocket I had sewn myself for exactly this moment, and pulled out my father's envelope. What is that? Lorenzo's smile flickered. Proof. 17 years of evidence that my father gathered. Documents showing that you were the traitor. Recordings of your conversations with Victor. Financial records tracing the payments from the Kozlov family to your accounts. I held the envelope up for everyone to see. The truth, Lorenzo. The thing you've been running from your entire life. For the first time, I saw fear in Lorenzo's eyes. Guards! His voice was sharp. Take that from her. But before anyone could move, the doors to the ballroom burst open again. This time, armed men flooded in, but not Lorenzo's men. These were the uniform of the Italian Federal Police, aisled by a woman with steel-gray hair and a badge that glittered in the chandelier light. Lorenzo Ravello, Victor Kozlov, you are under arrest for the murder of Salvatore Ravello and numerous other crimes against the state. The woman, a federal prosecutor I later learned, gestured to her officers. Take them. Chaos erupted. Lorenzo tried to run but was tackled by 2 officers. Victor attempted to draw a weapon but was disarmed before he could fire a single shot. The guards who had betrayed Damien found themselves surrounded and outgunned. And in the middle of it all, I stood perfectly still, clutching my envelope of truth, watching 17 years of lies finally come crumbling down. When it was over, when Lorenzo and Victor had been dragged away in handcuffs, when the corrupt guards had been arrested, when the innocent guests had been allowed to leave, I found myself standing alone in the empty ballroom. No, not alone. Damien stood by the windows, his back to me, staring out at the rain that still fell in sheets against the glass. How long did you know? His voice was quiet, defeated. Isolde told me 3 months ago. She's been working with my father to gather the evidence ever since. My mother, he laughed bitterly. My broken, grief-stricken mother. All this time, she was the strongest one of us all. I walked toward him slowly, stopping a few feet away. She never stopped fighting for the truth. For you. And you? He finally turned to face me, and the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable. I kidnapped you, forced you to sign that contract, threatened your family based on lies. Yes, I was wrong about everything. The admission seemed to cost him something vital. Your father was a hero, and I turned him into a villain. I made you pay for crimes that were never committed. Yes. How can you even look at me? I considered the question carefully. How could I look at him? This man who had taken everything from me. This man who had turned my life upside down based on his brother's lies. But I also saw the boy who had lost his father at 17. The son who had spent his entire adult life trying to avenge a death that his own brother had caused. The man who had been manipulated and betrayed by everyone he should have been able to trust. Damien Ravello was not innocent, but he was not the true villain of this story either. Because, I said finally, you were a victim too. We both were. Lorenzo used us, used everyone, as pieces in his sick game. And now he's going to pay for it. Something shifted in Damien's expression. Not hope. He was too damaged for hope. But perhaps the first stirring of something that could become hope, given time. The contract, he said. I'll void it, Tonight. You're free. Your family is free. I'll make sure they're protected, that they never have to run again. Thank you. It's not enough. His voice cracked slightly. Nothing I do will ever be enough. I can't give you back the 7 months I stole. I can't erase the fear and pain I caused. No, I agreed. You can't. But you can try to be better. You can try to build something good from the ashes of your brother's destruction. Damien looked at me, really looked, like he was seeing me for the first time. Will you? He stopped, shaking his head. No, I have no right to ask anything of you. Ask anyway. A long pause. The rain continued to fall. Somewhere in the mansion I could hear voices, the cleanup beginning, the aftermath being managed. Will you stay? Damien's voice was barely audible. Not as my prisoner, not as my fake fiancé, but as, I don't know, someone who knows the truth, someone who might help me figure out how to be better. It was the most vulnerable I had ever seen him. This powerful, dangerous man, reduced to something almost human by the weight of his mistakes and his grief. I should have said no. I should have taken my freedom and run, put as much distance between myself and the Ravello family as possible. That would have been the smart choice, the safe choice. But I had never been particularly smart or safe. I'll stay, I said. For now. We'll figure out the rest as we go. And for the first time since I had met him, Damien Ravello's smile reached his eyes. 1 year later, I stood in the same ballroom where everything had changed, but it was barely recognizable. The cold marble had been warmed with carpets. The stark walls had been softened with artwork. And instead of criminals and conspirators, the room was filled with people who genuinely wanted to be there. My family stood at the center of it all. My father, no longer a fugitive, had been officially cleared of all charges and publicly recognized as a hero who had tried to save Salvatore Ravello's life. The restaurant had been reopened, not the old one, but a new one, bigger and better, funded by money that Damien had insisted on providing as restitution. My mother had finally stopped looking over her shoulder. She sang again now, those Sicilian lullabies that had haunted my childhood, and her voice was stronger than ever. Valentina had been accepted to a prestigious marine biology program. In 3 months, she would be studying whales and dolphins, just like she had always dreamed. The posters in her room had been replaced with textbooks, and her eyes sparkled with excitement every time she talked about her future. And Isolda, dear, fierce Isolda, had defied every doctor's prediction. She was still frail, still sick, but she refused to die until she saw justice served. She sat in a wheelchair near the windows, watching the party with a satisfaction that made her look 20 years younger. Lorenzo was in prison, awaiting trial for his father's murder and dozens of other crimes. Viktor Kozlov had been extradited to face charges in 3 different countries. The network they had built was being systematically dismantled, the legitimate businesses separated from the criminal ones. And Damien was beside me, as he had been for the past year. Not as my captor, not as my fake fiancé, but as something else entirely. Something that had grown slowly, carefully, from the ashes of everything we had both lost. "You're thinking too loud," he murmured, his hand finding mine. "This is a celebration. You're supposed to be happy." I am happy. And I realized. Despite everything, the pain and fear and uncertainty, I was happy in a way I had never expected to be. The past year had not been easy. There had been trials, literal ones, in courtrooms, where I had testified about everything I had witnessed. There had been adjustments, learning to trust someone I had been trained to fear. There had been arguments and setbacks, and moments when I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake by staying. But there had also been healing. Damien had dismantled the criminal elements of his empire, keeping only the legitimate businesses. He had personally apologized to my father, an encounter that had been awkward and painful, but ultimately cathartic. He had spent hours with his mother, listening to stories about the man Salvatore had really been, not the mythologized crime lord, but the father and husband who had loved his family. He was not the same man who had forced me to sign that contract. He never would be that man again. And I was not the same woman who had walked into his study with trembling hands and a terrified heart. I had faced monsters and survived. I had uncovered truths and delivered justice. I had become stronger than I ever knew I could be. "There's something I want to ask you," Damien said, and there was a nervousness in his voice that I had never heard before. "What is it?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. My heart stuttered. "We've been pretending to be engaged for so long, and I know I have no right to ask this, after everything I've done, but..." He opened the box to reveal a ring. Not the massive diamond he had given me for our fake engagement, but something simpler. An emerald, surrounded by tiny pearls, set in a band of rose gold. "It was my grandmother's," he said. "My father gave it to my mother, and I want to give it to you. If you'll have me. Not because of a contract, not because of debts or vengeance or any of the things that brought us together, but because somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, I fell in love with you. Truly, completely, in a way I didn't think I was capable of." Tears pricked at my eyes. "You're asking me to marry you? For real this time?" "I'm asking you to give me a chance to be worthy of you, to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for everything I've done." He looked at me with such vulnerability, such hope, that it took my breath away. "I love you, Ellaria. I love your strength and your courage and the way you turned my entire world upside down. I love how you fought for the truth, even when it would have been easier to give up. I love how you looked at the monster I was and saw someone worth saving." I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the night he had stormed into my father's restaurant, the contract I had signed with trembling hands, the months of captivity that had slowly transformed into something else entirely, the secrets I had uncovered, the dangers I had faced, the love that had grown in the most unlikely of places. "Yes," I said, and the word felt like coming home. Damien's face transformed. Relief, joy, disbelief all mingled together as he slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for me all along. He kissed me, and the room erupted in cheers. My father was crying, my mother was laughing, Valentina was jumping up and down like a child. And Isolde was smiling. The kind of smile that said she had known this would happen all along. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the ballroom had fallen silent, Damien and I stood on the balcony, looking out at the stars. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" I asked. "If Lorenzo hadn't lied, if your father hadn't been killed, if we had met under normal circumstances. Sometimes. His arm tightened around my shoulders. But then I wouldn't be the man I am now, and you wouldn't be the woman you are. Our pain shaped us, even if it almost destroyed us, too. Poetic. He laughed softly. I've been reading more. You're a bad influence. I leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my cheek. For what it's worth, I think I would have fallen in love with you anyway, even without all the drama. You think so? I know so. I pulled back to look at him. There's something in you, Damien. Something that calls to something in me. Like we were always supposed to find each other, one way or another. He kissed my forehead, gentle and tender. Then maybe all of it, the pain, the lies, the darkness, maybe it was worth it, if it led us here. I thought about that, about worth and sacrifice, and the strange paths that life takes us down. A year ago, I had been a prisoner in this house. Now I was choosing to make it my home. A year ago, I had feared Damien Ravello. Now I loved him with every fiber of my being. Life is strange that way. The worst moments can become the foundation for the best ones. The deepest wounds can heal into the strongest bonds. And sometimes, the person you thought was your enemy turns out to be your destiny. I looked up at the stars, thinking of my father, of Isolde, of all the people who had sacrificed so much to bring us to this moment. They had fought for the truth. They had fought for justice. And in the end, they had fought for love. Thank you, I whispered, to them, to the universe, to whatever force had guided us through the darkness and into the light. Damien looked down at me. For what? For not giving up on me. For letting me see who you really are. His eyes shone in the starlight. Thank you for seeing me. For believing that I could be better. We stood there for a long time, two souls who had found each other against all odds, looking out at a world that suddenly seemed full of possibilities. The contract that had bound us together had long since been destroyed, but what had replaced it was something far stronger, a bond forged in fire, tested by darkness, and proven in light. This was not the ending I had imagined when I walked into that restaurant on my 23rd birthday. This was not the fate I had expected when I signed my name on that terrible piece of paper. But as I stood there with the man I loved, surrounded by family and hope and the promise of tomorrow, I realized something. This ending was better. This ending was everything. And it was just the beginning. Do you remember the question I asked earlier? About standing on the edge? About whether to step into the unknown or stay safe in ignorance? I chose to step forward. I chose to face the truth, no matter how painful. And it brought me here, to this moment, to this love. Sometimes the most terrifying choices lead to the most beautiful destinations. Sometimes the contracts we're forced to sign become the doorways to our greatest adventures. And sometimes the person we think is our enemy turns out to be the one who was meant to stand beside us all along. Thank you for watching this story. Thank you for staying until the end. And if you felt something, if your heart raced or your eyes teared up, or you found yourself rooting for us, please subscribe to this channel. There are more stories to tell, more journeys to take, more twists that will leave you breathless. Until next time, remember, Even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. Even when all hope seems lost, truth has a way of rising. And even when you're forced to sign a contract you never wanted, you might just find your happily ever after on the other side. This is Ellaria Ravello signing off and living happily ever after.